You get paid, and for a moment, it feels like things might finally be okay. You tell yourself this time will be different. You'll be more careful, more aware. But a few days pass, then a week, and somehow the money starts thinning out again. Not in one big, obvious mistake, just small things scattered across your days. And by the time you notice, it already feels too late to fully understand where it went. It's not that you're reckless. You're actually trying. You think about your spending more than most people admit. And still, there's this quiet frustration sitting in the background, like you're doing something wrong. But you can't quite point to what it is. I've felt that same low-level stress, the kind that doesn't panic you, but never really leaves either. You start making small adjustments, cutting back here, saying no there, but nothing seems to fully fix the feeling, because the problem isn't always in the big decisions you notice. Sometimes, it's hidden in the ones you've stopped seeing altogether. Number one, the invisible price of just this once. It rarely starts with something big enough to feel like a mistake. It's small, almost harmless, something you barely think about in the moment. You're tired, so you order food instead of cooking. It's been a long week, so you let yourself buy something small online. You upgrade, not because you need to, but because it feels like a reasonable improvement. Each decision stands on its own, and each one makes sense when you're inside it. That's what makes it so easy to miss. These choices don't register as spending problems because they don't feel excessive. They feel human. They feel deserved. And most of the time, they come with a quiet justification. You've been working hard. You haven't treated yourself in a while. This won't make a real difference. But the pattern isn't built on logic. It's built on repetition. Over time, just this one stops being occasional. It becomes familiar, automatic. You don't pause the same way anymore because your brain has already decided these moments are normal, safe, acceptable. And the tricky part is, nothing about it feels out of control. You're not losing money in a way that shocks you. You're just slowly creating a rhythm of spending that blends into your daily life. It's not about discipline, it's about awareness. Because when something becomes routine, you stop seeing it clearly. You stop questioning it. And that's when small decisions quietly stack into something much bigger than they ever seem. You don't notice the shift while it's happening. You only feel it later when your money doesn't stretch as far as you expected. You can't quite explain why. And that's where things start to get even more subtle. Because it's not just about what you buy, but the kind of life those choices slowly build around you. Number two, how comfort becomes a financial trap. At some point, your spending stops being about wants and starts becoming about maintaining a certain level of ease. You set things up to make life smoother. Subscriptions that save time, services that remove effort, small upgrades that make your day feel a little more manageable. None of it feels unnecessary. In fact, it feels responsible, like you're building a life that works for you. And for a while, it does. Comfort is quiet. It doesn't demand attention. It just settles in and becomes part of your routine. You stop thinking about what things cost because they're already built into your life, already justified. But that's where the shift happens. When something becomes comfortable, you stop evaluating it. You stop asking if it's still worth it. Not because you don't care, but because your brain has categorized it as normal. And once something feels normal, removing it feels like losing something even if you didn't truly need it. So instead of making intentional decisions, you start maintaining a system you didn't fully design. Your expenses begin to reflect convenience more than choice. And the strange part is, nothing feels excessive. You're not living wildly. You're just living in a way that slowly expands without you noticing. A little more here, a little more there. Each addition justified on its own, but together creating a lifestyle that quietly costs more than you realize. It's not that comfort is bad. It's that comfort rarely asks to be questioned. And when you stop questioning it, you stop noticing how much of your money is going toward keeping things easy rather than keeping them meaningful, which leads into something even deeper, because a lot of what feels like comfort isn't really about ease at all. It's about how you're feeling underneath it. Number three, the emotional spending you don't notice. Not all spending comes from wanting something. A lot of it comes from wanting to feel different. You don't always recognize it in the moment. It just feels like a small decision, something to make the day easier, lighter, more manageable. You buy something after a stressful afternoon. You scroll and add things to your cart without thinking it deeply. You treat yourself, not because you need anything, but because something inside you feels off. And that's the part most people don't talk about. Money often becomes a quiet tool for emotional regulation, not in an extreme way, but in subtle, repeated patterns. You spend to create a pause, a reward, a sense of control when other parts of life feel uncertain. It works, but only briefly. That short relief becomes reinforcing. Your brain starts linking spending with feeling better, even if the effect fades quickly. And because it doesn't feel dramatic or harmful, you don't question it. It becomes one of those habits that sits just below your awareness. You're not trying to escape reality. You're just trying to get through your day in a way that feels okay. But over time, these moments build into something bigger than they seem, not just financially, but emotionally. Because instead of addressing what you're actually feeling, you're gently covering it with small, consistent actions. And the hardest part is, this kind of spending doesn't look like a problem from the outside. It looks like normal life, which is why it's so easy to carry it with you, especially in a world where you're constantly seeing how others are living and quietly measuring yourself against it. Number 4, the quiet pressure to keep up. You don't wake up thinking you need more. Most days, you're just living your life, but you're also observing, not intentionally, just naturally. The people around you, the things they have, the way they live. It shows up in conversations, on your phone, in small details you barely register. And slowly, your sense of what's normal starts to shift. You see someone upgrade their space, and suddenly yours feels slightly lacking. You notice better clothes, newer devices, more polished lifestyles, and without deciding to, you begin adjusting your own expectations. It doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like alignment. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're just trying to exist at the same level as the world around you. To not feel behind. To not feel like you're missing something everyone else seems to have figured out. But that quiet comparison changes your financial behavior in ways you don't notice. You start spending not because you truly want something, but because it feels like the reasonable next step, the standard, the baseline. And the problem is that baseline keeps moving. There's always something slightly better, slightly newer, slightly more refined. And even if you don't chase it aggressively, you adjust to it gradually. Your spending rises in small, almost invisible increments. You don't feel like you're overspending. You feel like you're keeping up. But keeping up doesn't have a clear endpoint. It just keeps expanding, quietly pulling your expectations and your money along with it. And when you combine that with the habits you've already built, it becomes even harder to stop and take a clear look, which is exactly why so many people avoid doing it altogether. Number 5, avoidance, the most expensive habit of all at some level. You already know more about your money than you think you do. You know when things feel a little too tight, when you hesitate before checking your balance, when you tell yourself you'll figure it out later instead of looking closely right now. It's not ignorance, it's avoidance. Not because you don't care, but because looking directly at it brings a certain kind of discomfort, a quiet tension you'd rather not sit with after a long day. So you delay, you postpone, you keep things vague enough to stay manageable, and life makes that easy. You stay busy, you focus on work, responsibilities, daily routines, and in the background, your finances keep moving, subscriptions renewing, small charges adding up, patterns continuing without interruption. Nothing feels urgent. That's what makes it dangerous, because avoidance doesn't create sudden problems. It creates slow ones, the kind that build quietly over time, without forcing you to react, until one day, you realize things are more stretched than you expected. And by then, it's not about one decision. It's about a series of decisions you never fully looked at. There's also something deeper underneath it. Avoidance protects your current sense of control. As long as you don't look too closely, nothing feels broken. But the moment you do, you might have to face changes, cutting back, adjusting habits, making choices that feel uncomfortable. So instead, you stay in the in-between, not fully in control, but not fully out of control either. And that middle space can last for years. The cost isn't just financial, it's the constant, low-level uncertainty. The feeling that things aren't as stable as they could be, even if everything looks fine on the surface. And when you're not fully aware of your situation, it becomes much easier to fall into another pattern, one that feels logical, even responsible, but often hides the bigger picture. Number 6, when affordable becomes misleading. You're not making reckless decisions. You don't buy things wildly beyond your means. In fact, most of your choices feel reasonable, thought through, controlled. You look at the price, consider your situation, and decide this is affordable. And in that moment, it usually is. That's what makes this pattern so difficult to notice. Each decision passes the test on its own. A monthly payment that fits into your budget, a discount that makes something feel like a smart deal, a small upgrade that doesn't seem significant. Nothing feels like a mistake, but affordability, as you experience it day to day, is often narrow. It focuses on the present moment. This purchase, this payment, this decision, it doesn't naturally account for everything happening at once. Multiple subscriptions, ongoing commitments, small recurring expenses layered over time, each one individually manageable, but collectively heavier than they appear. And because they don't arrive all at once, you don't feel the full weight of them. You adjust gradually, you adapt. You tell yourself it's still within range, and technically it is. But something subtle shifts. Your margin becomes smaller. Your flexibility tightens. You have less room for unexpected changes, less freedom to make different choices without feeling the pressure. You're still in control, but with less space than before. And that's the hidden cost of affordable. It doesn't just measure what you can handle today. It slowly shapes what you're able to handle tomorrow. Over time, you realize it's not about whether you can afford something. It's about how many of those affordable decisions your life is quietly carrying all at once. And when you start to see that clearly, another question naturally begins to surface: what all of this is really costing you beyond just money. Number 7, the real cost. Attention, energy, and freedom. By now, it starts to feel like this isn't only about numbers anymore. Because the impact of your spending doesn't just show up in your bank account. It shows up in like you have in your life. Every subscription, every payment, every financial commitment, no matter how small, asks something from you. Not just money, but attention. A part of your mental energy stays tied to maintaining it all. You keep track, even loosely. You adjust your decisions around it. You think twice before saying yes to something new. Not because you don't want to, but because there's already so much in place. And over time, that adds a kind of quiet weight. It's not overwhelming enough to force a big change, but it's present enough to shape your behavior. You become slightly more cautious, slightly more restricted. You plan your life around what's already been decided financially. That's where the deeper cost shows up. It's in the opportunities you don't take because things feel the tight, the flexibility you don't have because your money is already committed, the choices that feel harder than they should. You're still functioning, still moving forward, but with less freedom than you expected for the effort you're putting in. And that's the part many people never fully connect: how small, repeated financial patterns slowly define the boundaries of their lives. Not in a dramatic way, just in quiet limitations that build over time, which is why seeing all of this clearly matters more than any single decision you could change. Nothing here is about cutting everything out or becoming overly strict with yourself. It's about noticing what was always there, just slightly out of focus. The small decisions that stopped feeling like decisions, the comforts that turned into expectations, the habits that felt normal, but slowly shaped your financial reality in ways you didn't question. There's no need to fix everything at once. But when you start to see these patterns clearly, something shifts. Not dramatically, but quietly. You pause a little more. You question things you used to accept automatically. You begin choosing instead of just continuing. And that's where change actually begins. Not from pressure, not from guilt, but from awareness. Because once you understand what your money has really been costing you, you don't need extreme discipline. You just start making slightly different decisions. And over time, those small shifts create something that feels different, not just in your finances, but in how much space and control you feel in your life again.